When the police lights flash outside a mother's home, the truth behind her silence is about to shake an entire community. What happens next will leave you questioning justice itself. The night was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that carries a weight of sadness no one dares to break. In a forgotten corner of the city, Illa sat by the cracked window of her tiny trailer, watching her son Mikey's chest rise and fall as he slept. His breathing was shallow, each inhale fragile as though it might not come again. Fever had taken over his little body, yet his hand clutched tightly onto the frayed edge of his blanket, a blanket that had seen too many winters. Illa's own body was weak, trembling from a fever she could no longer fight, but her eyes stayed sharp. She knew she couldn't collapse, not when Mikey depended on her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she ignored it. What mattered was that her son didn't wake up crying in pain. The last handful of rice she had cooked hours earlier was gone. She had stretched it thin, lying to Mikey that she wasn't hungry while feeding him the last spoonful. Now the empty pot sat mocking her in the dim light. She whispered softly to herself, "Tomorrow. I'll find a way." But tomorrow came sooner than expected. Just past midnight, the sound of sirens ripped through the stillness. Blue and red. Lights bounced off the thin curtains, painting the walls in violent flashes. Illa's heart froze. She rushed to Mikey's side, pulling him close, her mind racing. She hadn't done anything wrong. Or had she? A pounding knock shook the fragile door. "Open up! Police!" Mikey jolted awake, frightened. His small arms clung to his mother's waist. "Mama, what's happening?" "Shh, baby. It's okay," Illa whispered, though her own voice trembled. The door splintered open and two uniformed officers stepped inside, their boots heavy against the hollow floor. Neighbors peeked through windows, shadows gathering in the dark like vultures waiting for a spectacle. "Illa Rodriguez?" one officer barked. "Yes," she answered, clutching Mikey tighter. "You are under arrest for theft." The words slammed into her chest. "Theft?" Illa's voice cracked. I didn't steal anything. Please, you've got it wrong." The officer held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside, it was a single torn sack of rice. Illa's heart sank. Her knees buckled, but she stayed standing for Mikey's sake. That rice? She had borrowed it from Ms. Martha down the street. A desperate act, yes, but not a crime. She had promised to repay it, even offered to wash dishes for her neighbor in return. "This is a mistake," Illa pleaded, her voice breaking. "I only borrowed it for my child. Please." But the officers were unmoved, cold, efficient. They pulled out the handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent," Mikey screamed, clinging to his mother as they wrenched her arms behind her back. His tiny fists pounded against the officer's legs. "Don't take my— Mama! She didn't do anything! Please!" The trailer's thin walls couldn't contain his cries. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches, whispering and pointing. Some sneered, their judgment slicing through Illa like a blade. "About time. They caught her," one muttered. "Always begging for food. Pretending to be innocent," another scoffed. Each word was another stone of shame hurled at her chest. Illa's face burned, not from guilt, but from the humiliation of being dragged through the dirt of lies she couldn't fight. Her mind screamed, "Not in front of Mikey. Please, God, not in front of him." The officers pulled her toward the flashing lights, and Mikey stumbled after them, barefoot, crying until his voice cracked. A social worker waiting by the patrol car held him back, prying his tiny arms from Illa's waist. "Mama!" His cry tore through the night. Illa twisted in the officer's grip, desperate to look at her son one last time. Her heart shattered as she saw his small frame collapse into the arms of a stranger. "Be brave, Mikey," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Mama loves you. Don't forget that." The patrol car door slammed shut, cutting off her view. Inside the police car, Illa's wrists ached from the cuffs, her body shivering from fever and fear. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the trailer, her only home, fade into the distance. Somewhere across town, Sebastian Alvarez sat in his penthouse apartment, the glow of his phone screen lighting his face. His eyes narrowed as he read the headline flashing across social media, "Single mother arrested for theft, child taken into custody." He froze. The name leapt from the screen and gripped his chest. Illa Rodriguez. The air left his lungs. He hadn't spoken her name in years, hadn't dared to let his mind wander back to the life he abandoned. But now, here it was, staring back at him in bold letters, dragging with it memories of love, regret, and a question that now screamed louder than ever. Could that child be mine? The cell was colder than Illa had imagined. Concrete walls, damp and stained, pressed in on her from all sides. The flickering light overhead hummed like a cruel reminder that she was no longer free. Illa sat on the narrow metal bench, her wrists still sore from the handcuffs. Every bone in her body ached, not from the arrest alone, but from exhaustion, fever, and the crushing weight of humiliation. She closed her eyes, replaying the sight of Mikey being pulled from her arms. His cries echoed inside her skull, sharper than the clang of prison doors. She pressed her palms to her ears, as if she could silence the memory, but it only grew louder. Across town, Mikey sat in a small foster home. The room smelled of disinfectant, the bed too big for his small frame. He clutched a toy car tightly in his fist, the only thing his mother had managed to hold on to for him through the chaos. His eyes were red and swollen, his little chest heaving with soft sobs. Every sound outside the door made him jolt, thinking it might be his mother coming to get him. But the door never opened for her. The social worker who checked on him tried to offer a smile. "You'll be safe here for a little while, sweetheart." But Mikey's response was only a whispered plea. "I want Mama." Back in her cell, Illa was summoned by a guard. "Visitor," her heart leapt. "Mikey?" she asked, her voice breaking with desperate hope. The guard's expression was flat. Not the boy. She was led into a small visitation room. On the other side of the glass sat a man she never expected to see again. Sebastian Alvarez. His sharp suit and polished shoes looked out of place in the grim prison, but his eyes, dark and conflicted, were the same eyes she had once known so well. For a long moment, neither spoke. The glass between them wasn't just physical, it was years of distance, betrayal, and silence. Finally, Sebastian leaned forward. "Is he mine?" His voice was low, urgent. Illa's jaw tightened. She looked away, her hands clenching on her lap. "Why are you here, Sebastian?" "You know why," he pressed. "I saw the news. That boy. He looks like me. Don't lie to me, Illa. I need the truth." Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. The last thing she wanted was to give him the satisfaction of an answer. "You left," she said coldly. "You made your choice years ago. That should be enough truth for you." Sebastian's hand curled into a fist against the table. Regret flickered across his face, but he held his ground. "If he's mine, then I failed both of you. Let me fix this." Illa's eyes finally met, his, burning with pain. "Fix this?" She almost laughed, though the sound was hollow. "You think you can walk back into our lives like nothing happened? My son doesn't need your money, Sebastian. He needs safety. He needs a mother who isn't dragged through courtrooms in handcuffs." Her voice cracked at the last word, but she refused to let tears fall in front of him. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, shaken by her resolve. For the first time, he saw clearly the toll life had taken on her. She was thinner and paler, but her strength was undeniable. A woman who had stood against poverty, sickness, and humiliation for years, and she was still standing. "Illa," he said softly, almost pleading now, "I need to be in his life. If the court sees I'm his father, maybe we can get him out of foster care. He shouldn't be alone." Her lips trembled. The thought of Mikey crying in a stranger's house pierced her heart again. Every instinct screamed to protect him. Yet letting Sebastian in meant reopening wounds she had stitched shut long ago. "I don't trust you," she whispered. "Then trust me for him," Sebastian replied. The guard tapped his watch, signaling the end of visitation. Illa rose slowly, her legs heavy. She gave Sebastian one final look before turning away. For a moment, she let her mask slip, and he saw the tears she had been holding back. When the door closed behind her, Sebastian sat frozen, his heart pounding. The weight of responsibility crushed down on him. He had walked away once. He could not walk away again. Meanwhile, Mikey lay curled under the blanket in the foster home. His tiny hands still clutched the toy car. In the silence, he whispered, "Mama said to be brave. Mama said she loves me." But his small voice broke into sobs, echoing in the emptiness of the unfamiliar room. Sebastian Alvarez sat in his office long after the city lights had dimmed. The glass walls of the towering building reflected a man who seemed to have it all: wealth, reputation, and influence. Yet his reflection stared back with haunted eyes. The news headline about Ila's arrest refused to leave his mind, and the image of that boy, Mikey, burned in his chest like a brand. For the first time in years, the silence around him felt unbearable. He pushed aside the glass of whiskey on his desk, untouched, and pressed his hands against his temples. His lawyers, words echoed in his mind. "Stay out of this. If the press links you to her, it could destroy everything you've built." Destroy everything. The thought was laughable. What was everything compared to the gnawing guilt that now consumed him? He had chosen ambition over love, power over responsibility. And now, fate had delivered the consequences in the form of a child he might never have the chance to know. The door creaked open. Georgia, his wife, stepped inside. Draped in luxury, she carried herself like a queen who ruled over more than a household. Her voice was sharp, calculated. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" Sebastian didn't respond. His silence was enough. Georgia's lips tightened. "Sebastian, listen to me. That woman is poison. She'll drag you down with her. Let the system deal with her. Don't throw your life away on the past." Her words struck like knives, but they only fueled his turmoil. He looked up, his voice low but firm. "If that boy is mine, then he's my blood. I can't just walk away." Georgia's face hardened, but her eyes flickered with something darker. Fear. She turned on her heel, leaving him in silence once more. Sebastian sank into his chair, thoughts swirling. He could almost hear Ila's voice from years ago, broken and pleading the night he walked away. He had told himself then that success would make the pain easier to bear. But success had never filled the hollow inside him. The next morning, he found himself back at the prison. He wasn't sure what he expected: anger, silence, or answers, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. Ila was led into the visitation room again. Her face was pale, her body weaker than before, yet her eyes held the same defiance. She sat down across from him, folding her arms. "Why are you here again?" Sebastian leaned forward. "Because I need to know the truth." "You already know it," she replied coldly. Her words hit like a verdict. He swallowed hard. "Ila, I made mistakes. I was selfish, blind. But I'm not that man anymore. Let me help you." "Help me?" She gave a bitter laugh. "You think you can undo years of struggle with your money? You think you can erase the nights my son cried from hunger, the times I begged for medicine, the humiliation of being called a thief?" Her words cut deep, but Sebastian didn't flinch. He deserved every blade. "I can't change the past, but I can change what happens now. Mikey deserves more than this." At the sound of his name, Ila's composure cracked. Her eyes softened, though her voice trembled. "He's my whole world, Sebastian. I carried him alone. I fought for him alone, and now they've taken him from me. Do you know what it feels like watching strangers pull your child away while you sit in handcuffs?" Her tears slipped free, and Sebastian felt his chest tighten. He reached toward the glass separating them, his hand trembling. "Then let me fight with you. For him. For both of you." Ila stared at him, torn between rage and desperate hope. Trusting him again felt impossible, yet the thought of Mikey lost in a foster home tore her apart. If Sebastian truly was ready to stand with them, could she deny her son that chance? Before she could answer, the guard called time. The moment slipped away, leaving both of them suspended in uncertainty. That night, Sebastian sat alone once more, but this time his decision was clear. He called his lawyer. "File the papers. I want paternity established, and I want custody of the boy." The lawyer hesitated. "Sebastian, This will be messy. Public. Are you prepared for what Georgia will do if— Do it, Sebastian. Cut him off, his voice firm. No more running. Across the city, Mikey lay in his foster bed, whispering into the darkness. Mama said she'd come back for me. He held the toy car tighter, hope flickering in his small heart. Neither he nor Illa knew that forces were already moving, that Sebastian, torn by guilt but driven by love, had chosen at last to face the storm. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and fresh paper, a blend of history and judgment. Reporters filled the benches, their pens poised, cameras waiting for a story that had already stirred whispers across the city. At the center of it all sat Illa Rodriguez, her hands folded tightly in her lap, wrists marked by the cold memory of handcuffs. She looked small against the towering walls of justice, yet her eyes were fierce, unyielding. Across the aisle, the prosecutor shuffled his notes with a smug confidence, ready to paint her as a thief, an unfit mother, a woman undeserving of sympathy. The judge entered, and silence fell. Court is now in session. Illa glanced over her shoulder once. The foster workers had brought Mikey, his fragile frame nearly swallowed by the oversized shirt he wore. He sat on a bench clutching the same toy car, his wide eyes darting nervously around the room. Illa's heart ached, but she drew strength from him. She couldn't falter. Not here. Not now. The prosecutor rose first, his voice sharp. Your Honor, we are here because Ms. Rodriguez was caught in possession of stolen goods, rice, taken from her neighbor's property. While the item itself may seem small, the act reveals a larger truth, a pattern of reckless, irresponsible behavior. Witnesses will testify to her neglect, her inability to provide, and the environment that endangers the child in question. He let the words hang in the air, casting them like stones. Illa's stomach twisted. To him, her desperation was a crime. Her public defender, young and visibly nervous, stood next. Your Honor, this case is not about theft. It is about survival. Ms. Rodriguez did not steal. She borrowed food in a moment of desperation to feed her sick child. Poverty is not a crime. Being a mother fighting for her son is not a crime. The judge's gaze was unreadable. Proceed with witnesses. One by one, neighbors took the stand. Ms. Martha, the woman Illa had borrowed rice from, shifted uncomfortably as she spoke. She came to me late at night. She begged. I gave her rice, but she never returned it. Did she say she intended to repay you? The defender pressed. Martha hesitated. She said she would, but she always asks, always struggling, always desperate. The prosecutor smiled thinly. No further questions. The next witness, Sonia, was harsher. Her voice dripped with disdain. She's always been like this. Pathetic. Asking for food, money, or help. It's no surprise she stole. That child of hers deserves better. Illa bit her lip until she tasted blood, her hands trembling under the table. Sonia's words cut deeper than any blade, not because they were true, but because they fed the narrative everyone wanted to believe. Then the moment came that shifted the room. The social worker called Mikey to the stand. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the frail boy stood, clutching his toy car. His small hands shook as he swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor approached gently, his voice deceptively soft. Mikey, can you tell us about your mother? Mikey swallowed hard. His voice was quiet but steady. My mom. She's the best. Mom. She gives me food even when she doesn't eat. She reads to me when I'm sick. She tells me not to worry. The prosecutor frowned. Did she ever steal for you? Mikey's lip quivered. He tightened his grip on the toy car. She never steals. She just borrows. She only wanted me to eat. Please don't take her away. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward, his gavel still in hand. The boy's words carried more weight than any argument could. Tears welled in Illa's eyes, but she held them back, unwilling to appear weak. And then, from the back of the courtroom, footsteps echoed. Sebastian Alvarez entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered his name. He walked straight to the front, his gaze locked on the judge. Your Honor, he said firmly, Before this case goes further, I must speak. The boy on that stand, Mikey, is my son." The room erupted in chaos, gasps, whispers, shouts. The judge pounded his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Illa's chest tightened, her breath catching. The words she had dreaded and prayed for had finally been spoken. Mikey turned his head, eyes wide, staring at Sebastian as if trying to understand. The prosecutor sputtered, "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." But Sebastian stood tall, unflinching. "Irregular or not, the truth must be spoken. I abandoned them once. I will not abandon them again." All eyes turned to Illa. Her heart pounded like a drum, torn between fury and fragile hope. In this moment, the trial was no longer just about a sack of rice. It was about truth, blood, and a family fractured by choices that could no longer be buried. The judge's gavel came down once more. "This court will recess. We will resume tomorrow morning." Reporters rushed out, hungry for headlines. Sebastian looked at Illa, his expression raw with regret and determination. But Illa turned away, her eyes fixed only on Mikey, who now clutched his toy car tighter, his world shaken by a truth he didn't yet understand. The next morning, the courtroom was overflowing. Word had spread overnight. A wealthy businessman had stepped into the middle of a poverty trial, claiming fatherhood of the defendant's child. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, cameras flashing as Sebastian Alvarez exited his sleek black car. Inside, Illa sat stiffly at the defense table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had not slept a single hour. The weight of Sebastian's revelation still echoed in her chest, colliding with years of pain, betrayal, and the bitter taste of survival. Mikey, seated beside the social worker, clutched his toy car so hard the paint was peeling. He glanced at Illa for reassurance, but his young mind was flooded with confusion. The man who had abandoned them now claimed to be his father. The judge entered. "Court is now in session." His voice cut through the murmurs. "Mr. Alvarez, yesterday you made a declaration in open court. You claim the minor, Mikey Rodriguez, is your biological son. Do you have evidence to support this claim?" Sebastian rose, his tailored suit and commanding presence stark against the weary figure of Illa. His voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed emotion. "Yes, Your Honor. I request a DNA test, but beyond that, I have financial records, photographs, and correspondence that show my relationship with Ms. Rodriguez years ago. I did not know about the boy until now, but I accept responsibility." Illa shot to her feet, her voice trembling but fierce. "You didn't know because you left, Sebastian. You walked away when I needed you most. You chose ambition over family." "Don't stand here acting like a savior," gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge banged his gavel. "Ms. Rodriguez, control yourself." But Illa couldn't stop. The years of silence, hunger, humiliation, all of it spilt out. "Where were you when Mikey was burning with fever? When I was begging neighbors for food? When the world turned its back on us? You weren't there. Don't you dare claim him now just because it fits your image." Sebastian's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch from her words, though they landed like knives. Instead, he turned toward Mikey, his voice softening. "Mikey, I never stopped thinking of your mother. I didn't know you existed. If I had—" Mikey's small voice cut through the tension. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. Reporters scribbled furiously. The prosecutor smirked, sensing chaos he could exploit. Sebastian's lips parted, but no words came. How could he explain the greed, the selfishness, the blindness of his past? There was no excuse, only regret. The prosecutor seized the moment. "Your Honor, this spectacle is irrelevant. The defendant is on trial for theft and child neglect. Whether or not Mr. Alvarez is the father does not erase her actions." The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps not. But if paternity is proven, this case takes on a very different shape. Custody, responsibility, and guardianship must all be considered." Illa's heart lurched. Custody. The word echoed in her ears like a warning bell. She saw the future unraveling before her eyes. Mikey ripped from her arms, handed over to a man who lived in mansions and moved in circles she could never touch. Her defender whispered urgently, "Stay. Calm, Ela. Don't let them twist this." But how could she stay calm when everything she had fought for, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, was on the line? As the recess was called for lunch, the tension boiled over in the hallway. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved into faces. "Ms. Rodriguez, how do you respond to Mr. Alvarez's claim? Do you believe he's trying to take your son? Is this about money?" Ela shielded Mikey, pulling him close. "This isn't a story," she hissed. "This is our life." Sebastian stepped forward, attempting to speak, but Ela turned on him. "Don't! Not here! Not with them watching!" His eyes softened. "I'm not your enemy, Ela." "You were the day you left." She pulled Mikey away, disappearing into the stairwell before cameras could follow. Meanwhile, another storm brewed. At the Alvarez estate, Georgia Alvarez, Sebastian's current wife, watched the news broadcast with icy fury. Her manicured fingers tightened around her wineglass until it shattered. "A child!" she spat, her voice venomous. "He dares bring this woman and her brat into my life?" Her mother, Mrs. Mildred, stepped in with a cold smile. "Calm yourself, Georgia. Men like Sebastian can be persuaded. He may feel guilt now, but guilt can be turned to shame. Shame can be weaponized." Georgia's lips curled. "Then let's weaponize it. That woman doesn't belong in our world, and I'll make sure the court sees it." Back at the courthouse, Ela sat in a quiet room with Mikey, tears threatening to spill. "Mom," Mikey whispered, "is he really my dad?" Ela brushed, his hair back gently. "Yes, baby, but that doesn't change who I am. I'm your mom. I always will be, no matter what happens." Mikey nodded, though the confusion in his eyes lingered. Outside, Sebastian stood alone in the corridor, staring at the courtroom doors. For the first time in years, the man who had built an empire felt powerless. His wealth couldn't rewrite the past. His influence couldn't erase Isla's suffering. And as the next session loomed, one truth became clear. This battle wasn't just about law. It was about love, betrayal, and the scars that money could never heal. The courthouse had turned into a battlefield of whispers, cameras, and hidden agendas. For Ela, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting Mikey from forces far more dangerous than poverty or humiliation. She had endured hunger, insults, and loneliness, but the storm that now approached carried the weight of wealth, power, and vengeance. Georgia Alvarez arrived at the courthouse like a queen entering her court. Dressed in a tailored suit and pearls that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, she carried herself with an arrogance that commanded attention. At her side was Mrs. Mildred, her mother, whose sharp eyes scanned the room with the cold precision of a predator. They weren't there as silent observers. They were there to destroy. Sebastian stiffened as soon as he saw them. "Georgia," he muttered, his tone laced with warning. Her lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. "Sebastian, darling, imagine my surprise when I learned my husband had a secret family tucked away in a trailer. Tell me, is this what you call integrity?" The words were loud enough for reporters to catch, and flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Ela felt the eyes of the world burning into her, branding her once more as the scandal, the shame, the outsider. The trial resumed, but the prosecutor, emboldened by Georgia's presence, sharpened his attacks. He painted Ela as unstable, irresponsible, a woman unfit to raise a child. But worse, Georgia and Mrs. Mildred had maneuvered their way into the proceedings, providing character testimonies against her. Georgia took the stand first. With a rehearsed sorrow, she said, "Your Honor, as Mr. Alvarez's wife, I must express my deepest concern. While I sympathize with Ms. Rodriguez, the environment she raises Mikey in is dangerous. Poverty, instability, and questionable judgment. No child deserves that. Sebastian has the means to provide a safer, healthier home. Shouldn't Mikey be given the life he deserves?" The gallery nodded, some convinced by her polished lies. Ila's chest burned. She wanted to scream that money didn't buy love, that Polished walls didn't guarantee happiness, but her voice was trapped inside her. Then came Mrs. Mildred. Her words were venom dipped in honey. "I have met Ms. Rodriguez before," she lied smoothly. "Even then, she carried herself with desperation. I warned Sebastian once that such a woman would bring nothing but shame, and here we are." Illa's public defender objected, but the damage was already done. Each word from Georgia and her mother felt like a chain tightening around Illa's neck. When it was Illa's turn to respond, the judge called her to the stand. Her palms were sweaty, her knees weak, but she stood tall. She locked eyes with Mikey, who nodded at her with quiet courage, and she drew strength from that small gesture. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling but clear, "I am not a perfect woman. I have begged. I have borrowed. I have stumbled. More times than I can count. But every choice I made, every humiliation I endured, it was for my son. When Mikey was hungry, I went without. When he was sick, I stayed awake night after night. When the world mocked us, I told him he was worth everything." She paused, her eyes burning into Georgia's cold smile. "Poverty is not neglect. Struggle is not abuse. Love cannot be measured in bank accounts or jewelry. If you want to call me guilty of anything, then I am guilty of loving my son beyond reason, beyond limits, beyond myself." A silence spread through the courtroom. Even the judge seemed moved, though his expression remained stern. But Georgia wasn't finished. As the court recessed, she cornered Sebastian in the hallway, her voice sharp and low. "If you think you can bring that woman into our lives, you're mistaken. I will not be humiliated. Choose her and that child, and you lose everything we've built." Sebastian's jaw clenched. "Everything we've built? Georgia, you manipulated me into silence for years. You paraded me through galas while Illa and Mikey starved. If you think I'll stay chained to your lies, you don't know me anymore." Mrs. Mildred joined in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you really believe that street woman belongs beside you? She will drag you down, Sebastian. And that boy, he is weak, frail, hardly the heir to your name." Those words snapped something inside Sebastian. His voice thundered, echoing through the marble halls. "Don't you ever speak about my son like that again. He is stronger than both of you combined, stronger than your lies, your cruelty, your greed." The confrontation drew stares from onlookers, reporters scribbling every word. Georgia's face flushed with rage, but she forced a smile for the cameras. "Careful, darling. Outbursts don't look good for businessmen." But Sebastian no longer cared about appearances. For the first time in years, he felt clarity. His wealth had built walls, but those walls had also blinded him. Now he saw clearly. His true family was Illa and Mikey, and he would fight for them, even if it meant burning down the empire he once valued. That night, documents surfaced, leaked by an anonymous source, that revealed Georgia's misuse of funds from Sebastian's charity foundation. Money meant for orphanages had been rerouted into her personal accounts. The scandal spread like wildfire, staining her perfect image. By the next morning, Georgia walked into the courthouse with fury barely contained beneath her polished facade. The press swarmed her, shouting accusations, but she kept her chin high, pretending control. Inside the courtroom, however, her composure cracked. Illa watched as Sebastian's lawyers presented the evidence of Georgia's fraud. For once, the courtroom's eyes weren't on her as the poor, struggling mother. They were on Georgia, the woman exposed as a thief in pearls. Mrs. Mildred tried to intervene, her voice sharp, but the judge silenced her with a gavel strike. "This court will not tolerate interference. If these allegations prove true, Mrs. Alvarez, you may be facing charges of your own." The tables had turned. Illa felt her breath catch, not in fear this time, but in cautious hope. The walls that had hemmed her in were beginning to crack, not because she had power, but because truth had finally begun to surface. And in that moment, Illa realized something profound. She had been fighting alone for so long, but now Sebastian had stepped into the fire beside her. Whether she forgave him or not, he was no longer watching from the shadows. He was in the battle. The war for Mikey's future was far from over, but the battlefield was shifting. Georgia and Mrs. Mildred, once untouchable, were cornered. And Illa, though battered, was no longer the woman begging at doorsteps. She was a mother standing tall in the face of giants. The last day of the trial dawned under heavy skies. A soft drizzle blanketed the courthouse steps, but inside the air was thick with anticipation. Reporters jostled for position, their headlines already forming. The businessman's secret son, the mother on trial for love, the wife exposed in scandal. Illa walked through the doors holding Mikey's hand, her heart pounding but her chin lifted. For weeks she had endured whispers, humiliation, and the piercing eyes of strangers. But today felt different. Today, the storm that had haunted her might finally begin to clear. Sebastian was already there, standing near the defense table. His suit was as sharp as ever, but his face bore the marks of sleepless nights, creases of worry, shadows of regret. When he saw Illa and Mikey, he straightened, but he didn't approach. Instead, he gave a small nod, a silent promise. "I'm here. I won't walk away again." The judge entered, gavel in hand. Court is now in session. Today, this court delivers judgment not only on the charges of theft, but on the matter of custody and guardianship of the minor child, Mikey Rodriguez. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Cameras clicked. The prosecutor rose first, his voice clipped. "Your Honor, while the defendant has painted Ms. Rodriguez as a mother doing her best, the evidence is clear. Poverty, instability, and questionable associations prove she cannot provide adequately for the child. With Mr. Alvarez stepping forward as the father, the court has a far better option for Mikey's welfare. We request that custody be granted to Mr. Alvarez." Isla's heart clenched. Custody. The word still stabbed her like a knife. Her defender rose, his voice firm this time. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of neglect, but of resilience. Yes, Ms. Rodriguez has struggled. Yes, she has lived in poverty, but never once has she abandoned her son. She has sacrificed, endured humiliation, and gone without food so that Mikey might live. That is not neglect, that is love. And while Mr. Alvarez may offer wealth, he cannot erase the years he was absent. He cannot buy the bond this mother and son share." The judge leaned forward. "And what of Mr. Alvarez's wife, Georgia Alvarez, and the recent revelations?" Gasps filled the room as Georgia's scandal was officially placed on record. The leaked documents showing her theft of charity funds had turned the tide. She sat stone-faced beside her mother, her once perfect composure now cracked. Sebastian stood, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Your Honor, I do not deny my failures. I left. I chose ambition over family, but I will not deny my son again. Georgia is no longer part of this matter. Her lies are hers to answer for. What I ask is simple, to be allowed into Mikey's life, to stand beside Illa, not against her. If custody means tearing him away from his mother, then I want no part of it. But if this court will allow it, I want to rebuild what I lost, with both of them." The gallery erupted into whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the prosecutor faltered, caught off guard by Sebastian's words. Illa's eyes widened. She had prepared herself for battle, for Sebastian to use his wealth and power to strip Mikey away. But instead, he had disarmed her with humility. For the first time, she saw not the man who left her, but the man who once loved her, the man who now seemed willing to fight for redemption. The judge's gavel struck once. Silence fell. Having reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the character of those involved, this court rules as follows. Ms. Illa Rodriguez is not guilty of theft. This court recognizes her as a devoted mother. Furthermore, custody of Mikey Rodriguez shall remain with Ms. Rodriguez. However, given the established paternity, Mr. Sebastian Alvarez will be granted visitation rights, with the opportunity to build a relationship with his son under court supervision to ensure stability for the child. The words washed over Illa like a tide. Not guilty. Custody intact. Relief surged through her and tears finally spilt down her cheeks. Mikey squeezed her hand, his small face breaking into a smile for the first time in weeks. Georgia erupted from her seat, her voice shrill. "This is outrageous! That woman will ruin you, Sebastian! She'll drag your name through the mud!" The judge's gavel came down hard. Mrs. Alvarez, you are dismissed. Any further outbursts will result in contempt charges. Mrs. Mildred tugged at her daughter's arm, but Georgia yanked free, storming out under a rain of camera flashes. Her downfall was complete. When the courtroom cleared, Sebastian approached Illa slowly, as if afraid she might shatter. Illa, he began softly, I can't undo the past, but I want to try, for him, for you, for us. Not with power, not with money, but with what little of me is left that's still worth giving. Illa studied him for a long moment. The anger she had carried for years still burned, but beneath it, something else flickered. Something dangerously close to forgiveness. You. Don't just walk back into our lives and fix everything, Sebastian, she whispered. I know, he said, but let me earn it. One day at a time. Mikey tugged at Illa's sleeve. Mom, can he come with us? Just for ice cream? The innocence of the request broke the tension. Illa knelt beside her son, brushing his hair back. Maybe, baby. Maybe. Sebastian's eyes glistened, his shoulders sagging with relief. It wasn't victory. It was a beginning. Weeks later, the trailer felt less suffocating. Sebastian had arranged repairs without flaunting his wealth, and Mikey was enrolled in a new school. At night, Illa still sat awake sometimes, wrestling with doubt. But each morning she saw Mikey run to the bus stop with hope in his eyes, and she felt a cautious peace. One evening, Sebastian arrived with a small box. He knelt before Illa, not with arrogance, but with humility. Inside was a simple silver band. I don't expect an answer now, he said, voice thick with emotion. But I want you to know, I don't want to build empires anymore. I want to rebuild us. Not for appearances, not for the world. Just for you and Mikey. Tears blurred Illa's vision. For so long she had survived alone, carrying the weight of 2 lives on her shoulders. Now, for the first time, she felt the possibility of not just surviving, but living. She didn't say yes, not yet, but she didn't close the box either. Mikey ran into the room, clutching his schoolwork. Mom! Dad! Look! I got an A! The word hung in the air. Dad. Sebastian's eyes filled, and Illa's lips trembled into a small smile. For Mikey, walls were crumbling, wounds were healing, and love was taking root again. And though the road ahead would be hard, the truth was undeniable. This was no longer a story of shame or survival. It was a story of redemption, of a family broken but not destroyed, of bonds reforged in fire. Because true wealth wasn't in mansions or status. It was in the laughter of a child, the resilience of a mother, and the courage of a father who chose love over pride. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to subscribe to Black Battlers so you never miss the next one. Your subscription gives us the power to bring you even more emotional and inspiring stories. Join the Black Battlers family today.